The gunshot that rang out across Main Street in Gila City, Arizona, that sweltering August afternoon in 1878 changed everything. Not because it killed anyone, but because it sent Delilah Hayes running straight into the arms of a man who would prove that redemption was more than just a word preachers threw around on Sundays. Delilah had been crossing from the Mercantile to the Golden Spur Saloon when the shot cracked through the air, spooking horses and sending townspeople scattering. She stumbled on her skirts, packages tumbling from her arms, and would have fallen face first into the dusty street if strong hands had not caught her shoulders. She looked up into concerned gray eyes set in a sun-weathered face beneath a dusty brown Stetson. "Steady there, miss," the stranger said, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the chaos around them. "Are you hurt?" Delilah shook her head, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how his hand still gripped her arms gently but firmly. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a square jaw shadowed with stubble. A badge gleamed on his vest. "I am fine," she managed, stepping back and smoothing her dress, a modest blue calico that marked her as respectable despite where she worked. "Thank you, Marshal." "Deputy," he corrected with a slight smile. "Owen Quentin, just arrived in town yesterday." His gaze swept the street where men were shouting about the shooter, someone who had apparently fired into the air during a dispute over a card game. "You work at the Saloon." Heat flooded Delilah's cheeks. Of course he would know. Everyone knew. Small towns had no secrets, especially about women who worked in establishments that served whiskey and entertainment. "I do," she said, lifting her chin. "Is that a problem, Deputy?" Owen bent to retrieve her scattered packages, a bolt of fabric, some thread, sugar wrapped in brown paper. "Not my business to judge how honest folks make their living," he said, handing them back to her. Their fingers brushed, and Delilah felt something spark between them, unexpected and unsettling. "Thank you," she repeated, tucking the packages against her chest like armor. "I should get back." She hurried away before he could respond, feeling his eyes on her back the whole way across the street. Her heart hammered in a way that had nothing to do with the gunshot, and everything to do with the kindness in those gray eyes. Men did not look at saloon girls like that, not with respect, not with genuine concern. They looked at them with lust or contempt or pity, never with the careful consideration she had seen in Owen Quentin's face. Inside the Golden Spur, the afternoon crowd was thin. Just a few ranch hands nursing beers and old Pete Donovan dealing solitaire in the corner. The saloon would not get busy until evening when the miners came down from the hills with dust in their throats and silver in their pockets. Delilah climbed the back stairs to the small room she rented above the bar, setting her packages on the narrow bed. She had been working at the Golden Spur for 3 months, since arriving in Gila City with nothing but the clothes on her back and desperation in her heart. The owner, a surprisingly decent woman named Margaret Sullivan, had taken one look at Delilah's circumstances and offered her work serving drinks and singing for the crowds. It was not the life Delilah had imagined for herself, but it was better than starving, better than what she had left behind in Silver City, New Mexico. That evening, Delilah put on her working dress, a deep red satin that showed more shoulder than she liked but that Margaret insisted drew customers. She pinned up her dark hair, leaving a few curls to frame her face, and painted her lips the color of ripe cherries. The woman in the mirror looked confident, even bold, nothing like the frightened girl who had fled New Mexico 3 months ago. Downstairs, the saloon had filled with the usual Friday night crowd. Smoke hung thick in the air, and the piano player, a jovial man named Charlie, pounded out a lively tune. Delilah moved through the room with practiced ease, carrying trays of whiskey and beer, dodging wandering hands with graceful sidesteps, smiling and laughing at jokes she had heard 100 times before. She was setting down a bottle at a corner table when she felt eyes on her, different from the usual leering gazes. She looked up and found Owen Quentin standing near the bar, his badge reflecting the lamplight. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Delilah's breath caught. He made his way through the crowd, and several men greeted him, slapping his shoulder, welcoming the new deputy. Owen returned the greetings but did not stop until he reached the bar where Delilah had retreated, suddenly nervous. "Evening, Miss Hayes," he said. Her name sounded different in his mouth, respectful, almost musical. "How do you know my name?" she asked, wiping down the bar though it was already clean. "Asked around," he admitted. "Hope you do not mind. I like to know the people in the town I am meant to protect." Protect? Delilah could not keep the skepticism from her voice. "Men like you do not usually concern yourselves with protecting women like me." Owen's expression grew serious. He leaned against the bar, close enough that she could smell leather and saddle soap and something clean like pine. "I made a promise when I took this badge that I would protect everyone in this town, regardless of their station or occupation. That includes you, Miss Hayes." Before Delilah could respond, a drunk miner stumbled into Owen's back, sloshing beer down his shirt. The miner wheeled around, ready to fight, but Owen simply steadied him with one hand. "Easy there, friend. No harm done. How about you let me buy you a coffee to clear your head?" The miner blinked, surprised by the gentle response, and allowed Owen to guide him to a table. Delilah watched the deputy handle the situation with calm authority, never raising his voice, never threatening. It was so different from the usual violence that erupted in saloons, where men settled disputes with fists and guns. Throughout the evening, Delilah found herself aware of Owen's presence, watching him from the corner of her eye as he made his rounds, speaking with patrons, diffusing tensions before they escalated. He never drank anything stronger than coffee, and he never let his gaze linger on the saloon girls in the way most men did. When their paths crossed, he always nodded politely, and once, when a cowboy got too rough grabbing Delilah's wrist, Owen was there instantly. "The lady said no," Owen said quietly, his hand on the cowboy's shoulder. The cowboy released Delilah immediately, muttering an apology. Owen watched him go, then turned to Delilah. "You all right? I can handle myself," she said, though her wrist throbbed where the cowboy had gripped it. "I do not doubt that," Owen replied. "But you should not have to. Not all the time." Something in Delilah's chest cracked open at those words, some protective wall she had built around her heart. She excused herself quickly, fleeing to the back room where she could catch her breath. This was dangerous, this feeling blooming inside her. She could not afford to care about Owen Quentin, could not afford to hope that he might see her as more than what she was. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Owen came to the Golden Spur most evenings, keeping the peace, making sure the games stayed honest and the rough patrons stayed civil. He always found a moment to speak with Delilah, asking about her day, telling her small stories about his rounds through town. She learned that he was 26, originally from Kansas, that he had been a ranch hand before taking up the badge, that he had a younger sister back home who wrote him letters he treasured. In turn, she shared carefully selected pieces of herself. She told him about growing up in Texas, about her love of reading though books were scarce, about the songs she sang that reminded her of her mother. She did not tell him about Silver City, about the man she had fled, about the desperate choices that had brought her to this life. Those secrets stayed locked tight inside her, too shameful to speak aloud. One evening in late September, when the desert heat had finally broken and the nights turned cool, Owen found Delilah on the back porch of the saloon during her break. She was looking up at the stars, countless and brilliant in the clear Arizona sky. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Delilah gestured to the space beside her on the steps. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds from inside the saloon, the distant howl of a coyote in the hills. "I have been thinking," Owen said slowly, "about asking if you might like to have dinner with me sometime. Somewhere proper, not the saloon." Delilah's heart leaped and plummeted simultaneously. "Owen, I do not think that is a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you are a deputy and I am a saloon girl. People talk." "Let them talk," Owen said simply. "I stopped caring what people thought a long time ago. I care what I think, what I feel, and I feel like I want to know you better, Delilah. The real you, not just the woman serving drinks." "This is the real me," Delilah said, but the words tasted like lies. Owen turned to face her fully, his eyes searching hers in the lamplight spilling from the saloon windows. "I do not believe that. I think you are someone who ended up here for reasons you have not shared, and I think you are afraid that if you let anyone see past the surface, they will judge you for whatever brought you to Gila City." Delilah stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. "You do not know anything about me." "Then tell me," Owen said, standing too. "Tell me your story, Delilah. Whatever it is, I promise you I will listen without judgment." "You cannot promise that," she whispered. "You do not know what I have done. I know that you work hard, that you are kind to the other girls here, that you send money to someone every month because I have seen you at the post office. I know that you sing like an angel and that you read poetry when you think no one is watching. I know that you flinch when men raise their voices and that you never let anyone walk you home. Those things tell me more about who you are than any story about your past ever could." Tears burned in Delilah's eyes. No one had seen her so clearly, had looked beyond the surface to the woman beneath. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Owen, just dinner," he interrupted gently. "That is all I am asking. One dinner, somewhere we can talk without all this noise, without you having to be the saloon girl and me having to be the deputy. Just two people sharing a meal." Delilah wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself from the inevitable hurt that would come when Owen learned the truth. But the hope in his eyes, the genuine affection she heard in his voice, weakened her resolve. "All right," she heard herself say. "One dinner." The smile that broke across Owen's face was like sunrise after a long night, bright and warm and full of promise. "Sunday afternoon. I know a place outside town by the river. We could have a picnic." "A picnic," Delilah repeated, a small smile tugging at her own lips. When was the last time anyone had planned something so innocent, so sweet for her? "Unless you would prefer a restaurant," Owen added quickly. "I just thought a picnic sounds lovely," Delilah interrupted. "Sunday afternoon." They made their arrangements, and when Delilah returned inside, she felt lighter somehow, as if the weight she carried had lessened just a fraction. But that night, lying in her narrow bed, doubt crept back in. What was she doing? She had no business courting a lawman. No business letting herself care for someone who represented everything honest and good when her own past was so tangled with shame. Sleep came fitfully, and in her dreams she was back in Silver City, running through dark streets, the sound of footsteps behind her, a voice calling her name with poisonous sweetness. Sunday arrived clear and beautiful, the sky a perfect blue dome over the desert landscape. Delilah dressed carefully in her most modest outfit, a simple green dress with a high collar and long sleeves. She braided her hair and left it hanging down her back, no paint on her lips, no artifice. If Owen wanted to see the real her, This was as close as she could manage. He arrived at noon with a horse and wagon, looking nervous and eager in clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his badge left behind. They drove out of town following the winding path to the Gila River, where cottonwoods grew thick along the banks and the water ran shallow and clear over smooth stones. Owen had packed an impressive spread: cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of lemonade. They spread a blanket under the trees and ate while the river murmured nearby, talking about everything and nothing. Owen told her about learning to ride when he was barely tall enough to reach the stirrups, about his father's ranch in Kansas, about the desire to make a difference that had led him to law enforcement. Delilah shared stories from her childhood in Texas, about her mother who had died when she was 15, about her father who had done his best but struggled after his wife's death. She talked about the books she loved, the places she dreamed of seeing, the life she had imagined before everything went wrong. "What changed?" Owen asked gently. "What brought you to Arizona?" Delilah's appetite vanished. She set down the apple she had been eating and stared at the river. This was the moment, the crossroads. She could lie, could make up some convenient story, or she could trust him with the truth. Her heart hammered painfully. "There was a man," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "in Silver City. His name was Garrett Wheeler, and he owned the biggest saloon in town, along with half the businesses on Main Street. He was older, wealthy, charming when he wanted to be. My father had died, and I had no money, no family. Garrett offered me a job serving drinks. I thought I was lucky." Owen said nothing, just listened, his gray eyes steady on her face. "It started small," Delilah continued. "He would ask me to sit with high-paying customers, to laugh at their jokes, to make them feel special so they would spend more money. Then he wanted me to do more. Wear more revealing dresses, let men buy me drinks, dance with them, touch them. I refused, tried to quit, but Garrett said I owed him money for room and board, for the dresses he had bought me. He said I could not leave until the debt was paid." Her hands twisted in her lap, and she felt Owen's hand cover hers, warm and steady. She drew strength from that touch and forced herself to continue. "One night, Garrett told me I had to go upstairs with a customer, a wealthy mine owner from back east. I knew what he meant, what he was asking me to do. I was not," she stumbled over the words, shame burning her cheeks. "I refused. Garrett got angry, angrier than I had ever seen him. He grabbed me, said I belonged to him, that he owned me. We fought, and I managed to get away. I ran to my room, grabbed what little I had, and climbed out the window. I stole a horse and rode all night, did not stop until I reached Arizona." Tears were streaming down her face now, years of fear and shame and guilt pouring out. "I was a saloon girl, Owen. Maybe not the way Garrett wanted, but I worked there. I wore those dresses. I let men think things about me. I am not respectable. I am not good enough for someone like you." She finally looked up at him, expecting to see disgust or disappointment, expecting him to stand up and walk away. Instead, Owen's face was full of compassion and something that looked like fury, though she realized it was not directed at her. "That man abused you," Owen said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "He tried to force you into a life you did not choose, tried to make you feel like you had no options, no value. You escaped, Delilah. You saved yourself. That takes courage." "I worked in a saloon," she repeated, needing him to understand. "I work in one now." "I am not. You serve drinks and sing songs," Owen interrupted. "There is no shame in that. You do honest work to survive. You told me yourself that Margaret runs a clean establishment, that she does not allow—" He stopped, took a breath. "Delilah, I do not care about what you did or did not do in Silver City. I care about who you are now, who you have always been underneath whatever circumstances forced on you." "How can you say that?" Delilah asked, her voice breaking. "How can you not care?" Owen moved closer, taking both her hands in his. "Because your past does not define my future, our future if you will let there be one. I am falling in love with you, Delilah Hayes, with your strength, your kindness, your resilience. The woman you are now, the woman you have always been, that is who I see, that is who I choose." The words hit her like a physical force, knocking the breath from her lungs. "You cannot love me," she whispered. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Owen said firmly. "I know that you are brave and honest, and that you deserve someone who sees your worth. I want to be that person if you will let me." Delilah wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself fall into the safety of his arms, but fear held her back. "What if Garrett comes looking for me? What if he finds me?" "Then he will have to go through me," Owen said simply. "And I promise you, Delilah, I will not let anyone hurt you again." Something broke inside her then, some final wall crumbling under the weight of his conviction. She leaned forward, and Owen met her halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Delilah was crying again, but this time from relief, from hope, from the overwhelming feeling of being truly seen and accepted for the first time in so long. They stayed by the river until the shadows grew long, talking and kissing and planning a future that suddenly seemed possible. Owen promised to keep her secret about Silver City, promised to stand by her no matter what the town gossip said. Delilah promised to try to let herself believe that she deserved happiness, deserved love. As they drove back to Gila City in the golden light of late afternoon, Delilah felt something she had not felt in months, maybe years. She felt free. The following weeks transformed Delilah's world. Owen courted her openly, walking her home after her shifts at the Saloon, taking her to Sunday services at the small church on the edge of town, introducing her to respectable families, as if she were any other young woman. Some townspeople whispered and stared, scandalized that the deputy was courting a saloon girl, but Owen ignored them with quiet dignity that eventually shamed most critics into silence. Margaret Sullivan proved a surprising ally. The saloon owner, who was in her 40s and had seen every kind of trouble the West could offer, took Delilah aside one evening and told her plainly, "That man loves you, girl. Do not be foolish enough to let fear or pride or shame push him away. Take the happiness while you can get it. God knows it is rare enough in this world." At the boarding house where Owen rented a room, his landlady, Mrs. Patterson, was less understanding. She made her displeasure clear, telling Owen it reflected poorly on his character to associate with a woman of questionable reputation. Owen listened politely, then informed Mrs. Patterson that Delilah Hayes had more integrity in her little finger than most of the self-righteous gossips in town had in their whole bodies. He found new lodgings the next day. Through it all, Owen remained steadfast. He met Delilah's doubts with patient reassurance, her fears with steady strength. He taught her to ride properly, not the desperate flight she had managed stealing Garrett's horse, but real riding, how to read a horse's mood, how to sit easy in the saddle. They spent Sunday afternoons exploring the desert, discovering hidden canyons and ancient petroglyphs, places where the world felt vast and full of possibility. One evening in late October, as the nights grew cold enough for frost, Owen arrived at the Golden Spur with unusual intensity in his expression. He found Delilah between sets and pulled her aside. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and urgent. Delilah's stomach dropped. "What is wrong?" "I sent a wire to a friend in New Mexico, asked him to look into Garrett Wheeler. I wanted to know if there was any warrant out for horse theft, anything that might make trouble for you." Owen took her hands, holding tight. "Delilah, Wheeler is dead. He was shot in a card game 3 weeks ago. You do not have to be afraid of him anymore." The news should have brought relief, but instead Delilah felt strange and hollow. She had carried the fear of Garrett finding her for so long that its absence left her unmoored. "Are you certain?" "Certain," Owen confirmed. "My friend sent a newspaper clipping. It is over, Delilah. You are truly free now." She sagged against him, and Owen held her while she processed the information while relief finally began to seep through the shock. He walked her home that night, and for the first time, she let him come inside her small room above the saloon. They sat on her narrow bed, fully clothed but close, talking until dawn about the future, about possibilities neither had dared voice before. "Marry me," Owen said as the first light crept through her window. "I know it is fast, I know people will talk, but I do not care. I love you, Delilah. I want to build a life with you." Delilah looked at this good man who had appeared in her life like an answered prayer, who had taken all her broken pieces and seen them as something worth treasuring. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They married 2 weeks later in the same small church where they had attended services, with Margaret Sullivan and Owen's fellow deputy standing as witnesses. Delilah wore a simple white dress that Margaret had sewn for her, and Owen wore his best suit with his hair slicked back and his hands shaking slightly as he slipped a gold band on her finger. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the preacher speaking about grace and redemption and new beginnings. When Owen kissed her as his wife, Delilah felt tears stream down her face, but they were tears of joy, of gratitude, of overwhelming relief that she had found this man in this place at exactly the right moment. They spent their wedding night in a room at the hotel, the nicest room in Gila City, and Owen was patient and gentle, making sure Delilah felt safe and cherished. He proved that love could be tender, that intimacy could be beautiful when shared between two people who truly cared for one another. Afterward, lying in his arms, Delilah finally believed what he had told her that day by the river. Her past did not define their future. She was not a saloon girl anymore, not a woman running from shame. She was simply Delilah Quentin, wife of Owen, woman starting fresh. They rented a small house on the quiet end of town, 2 rooms and a kitchen, with a porch that overlooked the desert. Delilah left her job at the Golden Spur, and while some money would be tight on a deputy's salary, Owen insisted he would rather eat beans every night than have his wife subjected to the rough atmosphere of the saloon. Instead, Delilah took in sewing and laundry, building a small business from the respectable women in town who appreciated her skill with a needle. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, learning to share space and make decisions together, learning each other's habits and moods. Owen snored and left his boots in the middle of the floor. Delilah sang while she cooked and reorganized the house weekly. They had small arguments about money and whose turn it was to fetch water, but they learned to talk through disagreements, to apologize when wrong, to laugh at themselves when tensions grew too high. In the spring of 1879, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses and been feeling queasy in the mornings, and when the doctor confirmed her suspicions, she rushed home to tell Owen. He was on the porch cleaning his rifle when she arrived, breathless and glowing. "I am going to have a baby," she announced, watching his face transform from confusion to shock to absolute joy in the space of a heartbeat. Owen dropped the rifle, not caring that it clattered loudly on the boards, and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby." That night they lay in bed with Owen's hand on her still flat stomach, talking about names and futures, about teaching their child to ride and read, about building a life fuller and richer than either had imagined possible. "I want to tell them the truth," Delilah said suddenly. "When they are old enough to understand, I want our children to know where I came from, what I survived. I do not want them to learn from gossip." Owen pressed a kiss to her forehead. "We will tell them together," he agreed. "We will make sure they understand that their mother is the bravest, strongest woman in Arizona." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the hot Arizona summer. Delilah's body changed, growing round and full, and Owen treated her like precious glass, insisting she rest, bringing her water and fanning her when the heat grew oppressive. Margaret Sullivan visited often, bringing baby clothes she had sewn and advice about childbirth that was surprisingly helpful. In late November, as the desert finally cooled and the nights grew crisp, Delilah went into labor. Owen fetched the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Gila City, and then proceeded to pace the floor outside their bedroom like a caged animal. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Owen could hear Delilah crying out, and it nearly killed him not being able to help, not being able to take away her pain. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, he heard a different sound, the sharp, indignant cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Chen emerged, wiping her hands on her apron and smiling. "You have a son, Deputy, a healthy boy with good lungs. Your wife is tired but well." Owen rushed into the room to find Delilah propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with such love and pride that Owen felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Owen approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect. The baby's eyes were closed, but his mouth worked steadily, searching instinctively for food. "He is beautiful," Owen whispered. "He is perfect. We made him," Delilah said, wonder in her voice. "This perfect little person." They named him Thomas James Quentin, after both their fathers, and called him Tommy from the start. He had dark hair like his mother, and what would prove to be his father's gray eyes. Tommy was a fussy baby, demanding and loud, keeping them up most nights those first months, but neither Owen nor Delilah minded. They were too amazed by him, too grateful. Watching Owen with their son, seeing this strong lawman reduced to cooing nonsense and making silly faces to earn baby smiles, Delilah fell even more deeply in love with her husband. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, changing diapers without complaint and walking Tommy through the house at 3 in the morning when the baby would not settle. As Tommy grew into a chubby, happy infant, their life in Gila City grew more secure. Owen was promoted to marshal after the previous one retired, a position that came with better pay and more respect. Delilah's sewing business thrived, and she began to make dresses for the wealthy mine owners' wives, intricate garments that required skill and brought good money. They moved to a larger house with 3 bedrooms and a proper yard where they planted vegetables and flowers. The whispers about Delilah's past faded as she proved herself a devoted wife and mother, active in the church and kind to her neighbors. Most people forgot or chose not to remember that she had once worked at the Golden Spur. She became simply Mrs. Quentin, the marshal's wife, respectable and valued. But Delilah did not forget. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she thought about the girl she had been in Silver City, desperate and trapped, and the woman she had become here in Gila City, free and loved. She thought about how close she had come to a very different life, how easily she could have given up or given in. She thought about Owen's words that day by the river, how he had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, how his love had given her the courage to believe in her own redemption. When Tommy was 2, Delilah found herself pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, was less frightened and more confident. Their daughter was born on a clear April morning in 1882, arriving so quickly that Owen barely had time to fetch Mrs. Chen. They named her Rose Marie, and she was tiny and delicate, with Delilah's dark eyes and Owen's steady temperament. With 2 children, their house became louder and more chaotic, but also fuller and happier. Tommy was a protective big brother, always wanting to help with the baby, bringing her toys and patting her head with toddler gentleness. Owen built additions to the house, adding a proper dining room and a study where Delilah could work on her sewing. They bought more land, started keeping chickens and a milk cow, becoming almost self-sufficient. The years flowed like the Gila River, steady and sure. Tommy grew into a curious boy who loved horses and asked endless questions about everything. Rose became a laughing, affectionate child who adored her father and followed him everywhere. Owen proved an exceptional marshal, fair but firm, respected throughout the territory. Delilah's reputation as a seamstress spread beyond Gila City, and she sometimes traveled to neighboring towns to fit wealthy clients, always with Owen accompanying her. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Owen took Delilah back to the spot by the river where they had shared their first picnic, where she had told him the truth about her past. They left the children with Margaret Sullivan, who had become like a grandmother to Tommy and Rose, and spent the afternoon alone together. "You remember what you said that day?" Delilah asked, lying with her head on Owen's shoulder, watching clouds drift across the sky. "About my past not defining your future." "Our future," Owen corrected, as he always did. "And yes, I remember. I meant every word." "I did not believe you then," Delilah admitted. "I could not imagine that someone could truly love me knowing where I had been, what I had done." "You had not done anything wrong," Owen said firmly. "You survived. That is all you did, all you have ever done. Survived and thrived and become this incredible woman that I get to love every day." Delilah turned to look at him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "I love you, Owen Quentin. I do not say it enough, but I do, with everything I am." "I know," Owen said, kissing her softly. "And I love you, Delilah, always have, always will." They made love there by the river, gentle and sweet and familiar after 5 years of marriage, then lay tangled together as the sun moved across the sky, talking about their children, their dreams, their contentment with the life they had built together. That night, walking home hand in hand through the desert twilight, Delilah felt a peace she had never imagined possible. She thought about the terrified girl who had fled Silver City in the darkness, stealing a horse and riding blindly toward an unknown future. She thought about arriving in Gila City with nothing but hope and desperation, taking work at the Golden Spur because she had no other choice. She thought about the day Owen had caught her when she stumbled, how that simple act of kindness had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, squeezing her hand. "About how lucky I am," Delilah replied. "About how everything terrible I went through led me here to you, to our life. I would not change a single moment, Owen, because it all brought me to this." "I am the lucky one," Owen argued, as he always did. "I found you when I needed you most. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose beyond just wearing a badge." They reached their house as full dark settled over the desert, lamplight glowing warm in the windows, the sound of their children's laughter spilling out into the night. Tommy was supposed to be in bed, but they could hear him telling Rose some elaborate story, his voice high with excitement. Delilah and Owen exchanged amused looks. "Should we go enforce bedtime?" Owen asked. "In a minute," Delilah said, stopping on the porch to look at her husband in the lamplight. "I just want to stand here for a moment and appreciate this. All of this." Owen pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Every day," he promised. "Every single day we will appreciate what we have built together." They stood there for a long moment. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over judgment, hope over fear, future over past. Then they went inside to their children, to the warm chaos of family life, to the beautiful, ordinary miracle of home. The years continued to pass, marked by small moments and large milestones. Tommy started school and proved bright and eager to learn. Rose grew from a baby into a toddler, and then into a little girl with strong opinions and her father's sense of justice. Delilah's business continued to grow, and eventually she had to hire an assistant, a young woman named Sarah who reminded Delilah of herself at that age, trying to make her way in a difficult world. Owen became known throughout Arizona territory as a fair and honest lawman. He was offered positions in larger towns, places that would have paid better and carried more prestige, but he always declined. Gila City was home, he said. Their life was here, their friends and family. Why would they leave? In 1885, when Tommy was 6 and Rose 4, Arizona territory experienced a particularly harsh winter. Snow fell in the desert, a rare occurrence, and temperatures dropped low enough to freeze the water trough solid. Owen worked long hours helping townspeople prepare for the cold, making sure the elderly and poor had enough firewood and food. He came home exhausted each night, and Delilah would have hot food and warm blankets waiting, would rub his sore shoulders and listen to his concerns. During that cold winter, a young woman arrived in Gila City, thin and frightened, looking for work. She had a black eye poorly concealed with powder, and the way she moved, careful and guarded, was painfully familiar to Delilah. The woman's name was Iris, and she was running from something, though she would not say what. Delilah hired her immediately as her second assistant, despite not really needing the help. She saw herself in Iris, saw that same desperate hope and shame. Over the following weeks, Delilah gently drew Iris's story out. It was depressingly similar to her own. A man who had seemed kind at first, then became controlling and violent, a escape made in the dark of night with nothing but fear as motivation. One evening, after the children were in bed, Delilah told Owen about Iris, about her fears that the girl's past might catch up with her. "I want to help her," Delilah said. "The way no one helped me, the way you helped me." Owen thought for a moment, then nodded. "We will keep an eye out, make sure she is safe, and if whoever she is running from shows up, we will deal with it." But no one came looking for Iris. Slowly, the frightened look in her eyes faded. She began to smile, to laugh, to relax into her new life. Delilah taught her to sew more complex patterns, paid her fairly, and invited her to Sunday dinners with the family. Owen made sure everyone in town knew that Iris was under his protection, that anyone who bothered her would answer to him. Watching Iris blossom reminded Delilah of her own transformation, how love and safety could heal wounds that had seemed permanent. She shared her own story with Iris one afternoon while they worked on a particularly intricate dress order, told her about Silver City and Garrett Wheeler and the terror of running. "But look at you now," Iris said softly when Delilah finished. "You have everything. A husband who adores you, beautiful children, a home, respect. You made it through. You will too," Delilah promised. "It gets easier, Iris. The fear fades. The shame fades. One day you will wake up and realize you are not running anymore, that you are building instead of surviving." It just takes time and the right people around you. In the spring of 1886, Iris met a young rancher named Daniel Hooper who had come to town to sell cattle. He was kind and patient, and his interest in Iris was genuine and respectful. Delilah and Owen watched the courtship carefully, protective of the young woman they had taken under their wing. But Daniel proved worthy of their trust. He married Iris in a simple ceremony that summer, and they moved to his ranch, 20 miles outside town. Life settled back into comfortable routines. Tommy grew tall and serious, already talking about becoming a lawman like his father. Rose remained their wild child, always climbing trees and catching lizards, declaring loudly that she was going to be a rancher when she grew up. Delilah taught both children to read and write, making sure they had opportunities she had lacked growing up. On a hot July evening in 1887, as Delilah and Owen sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple, Delilah said quietly, "I am pregnant again." Owen's head snapped toward her, surprise and delight spreading across his face. "Again? Are you certain?" "Certain," Delilah confirmed, smiling at his excitement. "Due sometime in February, I think." Owen let out a whoop of joy that brought Tommy and Rose running from inside the house, demanding to know what was happening. When Owen told them they were going to have a brother or sister, Tommy looked thoughtful while Rose immediately began planning all the things she would teach the baby. This third pregnancy was harder than the previous two. Delilah was older now, 32, and she carried the baby differently, feeling every ache and discomfort more intensely. Owen fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more, do less, let him and the children handle the household chores. Delilah appreciated his concern even when she found it excessive. Their second son, William Owen Quentin, arrived on a cold February morning in 1888. The labor was long and difficult, frightening Owen badly, but both mother and baby emerged healthy. William, called Will from the start, had red hair from some distant ancestor, and a disposition even sunnier than Rose's. With 3 children, the house became a place of constant motion and noise. Tommy, now 9, took his role as oldest seriously, helping with his younger siblings and doing chores without being asked. Rose, 7, was less reliable but endlessly creative, always making up games and stories to entertain Will. The baby grew fat and happy, adored by everyone, spoiled by his big sister in particular. Delilah had to scale back her sewing business to manage 3 children, but she did not mind. These years when the children were young would pass too quickly, she knew. She wanted to be present, to watch them grow, to give them the stable, loving childhood she had never had. Owen was promoted again, this time to territorial marshal, a position that required occasional travel to other towns, but came with significant authority and increased pay. They renovated the house again, adding proper bedrooms for each child and installing one of the new indoor pumps that brought water directly into the kitchen. It felt luxurious after years of hauling water from the well. The 1890s brought change to Arizona territory. Railroads expanded, bringing more people and commerce. Gila City grew from a rough mining town into a more established community with real schools and churches and civic organizations. Owen helped manage this growth, balancing progress with law and order, making sure the town did not lose its character even as it modernized. Delilah became involved in the New Ladies' Auxiliary at church, organizing charity drives and social events. Some of the older women who remembered her saloon days occasionally made cutting remarks, but Delilah had grown a thick skin over the years. She knew who she was, knew the life she had built. Their opinions no longer had the power to hurt her. Tommy grew into a serious, responsible teenager who worked part-time at the general store and saved his money with impressive discipline. Rose remained a tomboy, more comfortable on horseback than in dresses, driving Delilah to distraction, but making Owen laugh with her fearless approach to life. Will was the family charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile and quick thinking. In 1895, Margaret Sullivan died peacefully in her sleep at age 68. Her death hit Delilah hard. Margaret had been the first person in Gila City to show her kindness, to offer help without judgment. At the funeral, Delilah spoke publicly about what Margaret had meant to her, how the older woman had given a desperate girl a chance when no one else would. She saw people, Delilah said to the gathered mourners. Really saw them beneath whatever surfaces they showed the world. She taught me that everyone has a story, that we should lead with compassion instead of judgment. I would not be standing here today, would not have the beautiful life I have, if Margaret Sullivan had not looked past my circumstances and seen my potential. We should all strive to see each other that way. Later, Owen told her it was the most beautiful eulogy he had ever heard. Delilah cried in his arms that night, mourning not just Margaret but the girl she had been when they met, the frightened young woman who had needed someone to believe in her. She cried, too, with gratitude that she had found that person in Margaret, and then again in Owen, and that because of them, she had become someone who could now offer that same grace to others. The new century arrived with celebration throughout Gila City. Tommy was 21 now, working as Owen's deputy and courting a sweet girl named Alice who taught at the school. Rose was 19, engaged to a rancher's son named Robert, planning a spring wedding. Will was 12, still the family clown but showing signs of his father's steady character underneath the jokes. Delilah was 45, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her face lined from years of Arizona sun. She felt every one of those years in her joints and muscles, but she wore them proudly. They were proof of survival, of endurance, of a life fully lived. Owen had just turned 50, his hair gone almost completely gray, but he was still strong and capable, still riding out to handle disputes and track down outlaws. He talked sometimes about retiring, but Delilah knew he would wear the badge until he physically could not anymore. It was part of who he was, that commitment to justice and protection. On a warm evening in May 1900, they attended Rose's wedding. Their daughter was radiant in a dress Delilah had sewn, standing beside Robert in the same church where Delilah and Owen had married 22 years earlier. Watching Rose exchange vows, seeing the love between her and Robert, Delilah squeezed Owen's hand. "What are you thinking?" Owen whispered. "That we did good," Delilah replied. "Look at our children, Owen. Look at the lives they are building. We gave them that." "You gave them that," Owen corrected. "Your strength, your resilience, your capacity to love despite everything you endured. That is all you, Delilah." After the ceremony, as they danced at the reception, Delilah reflected on the extraordinary, ordinary miracle of her life. She had survived things that should have broken her, had found love when she thought herself unworthy of it, had built a family and a home and a place in the world. The terrified girl who had stolen a horse in Silver City seemed like another person, someone from a story rather than her own past. "Do you ever regret it?" Delilah asked Owen as they swayed to the music. "Marrying me, I mean, taking on all my baggage." Owen pulled back to look at her incredulously. "Regret marrying the love of my life. Regret every beautiful moment of the last 22 years. Regret our children, our home, our partnership." Delilah Quentin, sometimes you ask the most ridiculous questions. Delilah laughed, the sound bright and free. "I suppose that is a no." "That is the most emphatic no you will ever hear," Owen confirmed. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Catching you that day on Main Street was the luckiest moment of my life." "I was the lucky one," Delilah argued, falling back into their old, comfortable disagreement. "We are both lucky," Owen compromised, kissing her softly. "Lucky we found each other. Lucky we had the courage to build this together. Lucky we let love be bigger than fear." They danced until late, celebrating their daughter's marriage and their own enduring partnership, surrounded by friends and family and the community they had helped build. When they finally headed home, walking hand in hand through the quiet streets of Gila City, Delilah felt profoundly grateful for every moment, every choice that had brought her to this place. Tommy married Alice 6 months later, and they immediately started working on giving Delilah and Owen grandchildren. Rose and Robert settled on his family's ranch, and Rose wrote long letters about ranch life that made Delilah laugh. Will announced his intention to become a lawyer, surprising everyone but making his parents proud. Their children were grown or nearly so, launching into their own lives, and Delilah and Owen had to learn to be just the two of them again. It was an adjustment, the quiet house after years of chaos, but also a blessing. They had time for each other again, long conversations and slow mornings, afternoons spent riding through the desert they both loved. Owen finally retired from law enforcement in 1902, handing his badge to Tommy with pride and perhaps a little relief. His body was not as young as it used to be, and he was ready to spend his remaining years in peace. They bought the old Sullivan place, the Golden Spur Saloon where Delilah had once worked, after it closed down when the mining industry slowed. They converted it into a boarding house for young women, a place where girls in difficult circumstances could find safe, affordable lodging. Delilah ran it with the same compassion Margaret had shown her, never asking too many questions, always offering second chances. Tommy and Alice's first child, a daughter named Eleanor, arrived in 1903, making Delilah and Owen grandparents for the first time. The joy of holding that tiny baby, seeing their son become a father, was indescribable. More grandchildren followed over the years. Rose and Robert had twin boys. Tommy and Alice had 2 more daughters. Even Young will eventually married and started a family. The years continued to flow, marked now by grandchildren's birthdays and holiday gatherings where the house overflowed with family. Delilah's hair went completely white, and Owen moved slower, his joints stiff from years of riding and working. But they were healthy and happy, surrounded by love, living proof that difficult beginnings did not determine endings. One evening in the spring of 1910, Delilah and Owen sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 60s now, slowing down but still active, still engaged with life. Tommy had become territorial marshal himself, following in his father's footsteps. Rose managed a successful ranch, Will practiced law in Phoenix. All 3 children were happy and prosperous, their own children thriving. "You remember," Delilah said softly, "that day when I told you about Silver City, about everything I had been through?" "Of course," Owen replied, taking her hand. "How could I forget?" "You said something that changed my life," Delilah continued. "You said my past did not define your future, our future. I did not believe you then. I could not imagine a future like this, could not imagine being this happy." "And now?" Owen asked, though he knew the answer. "Now I understand what you meant," Delilah said. "You gave me permission to leave the past behind to become someone new. You saw who I could be instead of who I had been. That gift, Owen, that grace you offered me, it made all of this possible." Owen lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her weathered fingers. "You gave me just as much, Delilah. You taught me about real courage, about resilience and forgiveness and love. You made me a better man, a better father, a better person. We saved each other." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the Arizona sky turn gold and pink and purple. The desert spread before them, vast and beautiful and enduring, much like their love. 32 years had passed since that afternoon when Owen caught Delilah stumbling on Main Street. 32 years of building and loving and growing together. "I would do it all again," Delilah said finally. "Every hard moment, every fear, every tear. I would do it all again because it brought me to you, to this life, to this moment." "So would I," Owen agreed, "every single moment." As darkness fell, and the stars emerged one by one in the clear desert sky, Delilah and Owen remained on their porch, grateful for the past they had overcome, and the future they had built, proof that love could redeem, that grace could heal, that two broken people could come together and make something whole and beautiful and lasting. Their story was not one of dramatic rescues or grand gestures, but of quiet courage and steady devotion. It was a story of choosing each other every day, of building trust through thousands of small moments, of proving through decades of partnership that the past truly did not define the future, that love could transcend shame and fear and create something far more powerful than either person could have managed alone. In the years that followed, Delilah and Owen continued their quiet, contented life. They traveled some, visiting their children and grandchildren, seeing parts of Arizona territory they had never explored. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918 with a gathering of 3 generations. Over 30 people crammed into their house, laughing and eating and sharing stories. As they aged, their children worried about them living alone, but Delilah and Owen refused to move in with any of them. This was their home, the place where they had built their life together. They would stay here as long as they could manage. Tommy and his family lived nearby and checked on them daily, bringing food and help with heavier chores, but respecting their independence. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1920, just after his 70th birthday. He had spent the evening on the porch with Delilah, talking and holding hands, and had gone to bed without complaint. When Delilah woke the next morning, he had slipped away sometime in the night, his expression peaceful. She sat with him for a long time, holding his hand, grateful that his passing had been gentle, that he had not suffered. The funeral drew people from across Arizona. Owen had touched countless lives during his years as a lawman and citizen, and they came to honor him. Delilah stood strong through the service, supported by her children and grandchildren, saying goodbye to the man who had been her partner, her protector, her greatest love. After Owen's death, Delilah could have faded, could have let grief consume her. Many widows did. But she was Delilah Hayes Quentin, survivor and fighter, and she had learned long ago that life was precious, that every moment mattered. She continued running the boarding house, continued being active in church and community, continued being present for her children and grandchildren. She lived another 15 years, watching her grandchildren grow into adults and start families of their own, meeting great-grandchildren, becoming a matriarch whose wisdom and strength set the tone for generations. She told her stories freely now, about Silver City and Garrett Wheeler and the terror of running, about arriving in Gila City with nothing, about working at the Golden Spur and meeting Owen. She wanted her descendants to know that she had not always been the respectable grandmother they knew, that she had survived darkness to find light. "Never let your past define you," she told them over and over. "Never let mistakes or circumstances convince you that you are unworthy of love and happiness. You can always start again. You can always choose a better future." Delilah passed away in her sleep on a warm June night in 1935 at the age of 80. She was found the next morning in her bed, looking peaceful, her hand outstretched as if reaching for Owen. On her nightstand was a photograph from their wedding day, two young people looking at each other with hope and love and the promise of a future they could not yet imagine. At her funeral, attended by over 100 people spanning 4 generations, Tommy spoke about his mother's courage and resilience. "She taught us," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "that where you start does not determine where you finish. She showed us that love and grace can heal any wound, that redemption is always possible, that you are never too broken to build something beautiful." My mother was a survivor who became a warrior, a frightened girl who became a woman of strength and dignity. We are all better for having known her. They buried her beside Owen in the Gila City cemetery, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the desert they had both loved. Her headstone was simple: Delilah Hayes Quentin, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, friend. But the real monument to her life was the legacy she left. The generations of children and grandchildren who carried her strength and resilience forward, who had learned from her example that the past was not a prison, that love could conquer shame, that grace was always possible. In the years and decades that followed, her descendants told and retold her story, making sure it was never forgotten. They spoke of how she had fled Silver City in terror, how she had found work at the Golden Spur, how she had met a young deputy named Owen Quentin who saw past her circumstances to the woman beneath. They told how he had loved her without judgment, how he had offered her a future free from the chains of her past, how together they had built something lasting and beautiful. The boarding house Delilah had run continued operating for decades after her death, renamed the Delilah Hayes Home in her honor, continuing her mission of offering safe harbor to young women in difficult circumstances. Her sewing business, which she had maintained almost until her death, passed to her granddaughters and great-granddaughters, keeping her name associated with quality and integrity. But more than any physical legacy, Delilah left behind a story of hope and redemption that touched everyone who heard it. She proved that your worst moments did not have to define your life, that shame and fear could be overcome, that love offered freely without judgment could heal wounds that seemed permanent. She showed that with courage and the right person by your side, you could transform yourself, could build a future brighter than any past darkness. Her love story with Owen became legendary in Gila City, told and retold until it took on almost mythical proportions, though the truth was extraordinary enough without embellishment. Two people finding each other at exactly the right moment, choosing love over judgment, building a life that lasted 50 years and created ripples that extended far beyond their own lifetimes. In the end, Delilah Hayes Quentin was exactly what Owen had always believed her to be: brave, strong, worthy of love and respect and happiness. She survived when survival seemed impossible, thrived when others would have merely existed, loved when she thought herself unlovable. Her past had not defined Owen's future, their future, and in the living of their life together, they had proved that grace was real, redemption possible, and love the most powerful force in the universe. The Wild West was a hard land that tested everyone who tried to make a life there, but it was also a place where people could start over, where the past could be left behind, where new identities could be forged. Delilah embodied all of that frontier spirit, taking the hardships and turning them into strength, taking the pain and transforming it into compassion, taking her broken past and building from it a beautiful, enduring future. Her story was ultimately a simple one, though not an easy one. A woman who made it through darkness to find light, who was loved by a good man and loved him in return, who raised children and built a home and made a place for herself in the world. But in that simplicity was profound truth about the human capacity for resilience, for change, for love that transcends circumstance and sees the person rather than the history. Years turned into decades, decades into generations, and still her story persisted, passed down through family and community. A reminder that the past did not have to be a prison, that shame could be overcome, that love offered without conditions could transform everything. Delilah Hayes Quentin, saloon girl turned marshal's wife, survivor turned matriarch, became a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt defined by their worst moments, trapped by their mistakes, unworthy of happiness. And somewhere in the vast Arizona desert, under the endless sky that had watched her transformation, her legacy endured not in monuments or buildings but in the lives she had touched, the grace she had shown, the love she had proven possible. Her past had not defined her future or Owen's future, and in that truth lay hope for everyone who came after, everyone who needed to believe that redemption was real, that love could heal, that tomorrow could be better than yesterday, that every ending could become a new beginning if you had the courage to reach for it, and someone to help you believe you were worthy of the reaching.